Um, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to this public lecture by the Distinguished Director General UNESCO, Irina Bokova. There are many distinguished friends and colleagues who are here, and I would like to especially thank them on a Friday afternoon. I want to explain to all of you why I'm wearing an Indonesian batik shirt. No, it has a UNESCO relevance. I don't know whether any of my friends from the Indonesian embassy are here, but in October last year, so only a few months ago, UNESCO recognized Indonesian batik as an intangible world heritage. And I thought it's only appropriate on this occasion that I wear an Indonesian batik shirt. Dean Kishore Mahbubani is away, and he has reminded me that he and I have developed a common habit of only making 3 points in our public speeches. This wisdom is actually from my wife, who is here somewhere in the back. So I will just say a few words about UNESCO, about Bulgaria, from which the Director General comes, and then about our Distinguished Director General. Singaporeans are not very well informed about UNESCO. That's not your fault, it's Singaporeans' fault. And it's Andrew Toh's fault. So I hope you don't mind if I begin by just saying a few simple facts about UNESCO. Some of you may not know that UNESCO was founded in the same year as the UN itself, in 1945. It is headquartered in Paris, and Singapore's love affair with UNESCO has been somewhat traumatic, no? We fell in love, we joined UNESCO, then we fell out of love, we withdrew from UNESCO, then 22 years later we fell in love with UNESCO again. So we've been back in UNESCO. Ambassador Andrew Toh is our permanent delegate to UNESCO. And the National Commission for UNESCO in Singapore is chaired by our Minister for Education, Dr. Ng Eng Hen. The preamble of the Constitution of UNESCO contains some of the most inspiring language of any UN body. And I hope you don't mind. You know this by heart, I'm sure. But I'd like to just share with you a few words from the preamble of UNESCO. Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. Ignorance of each other's ways and lives has been a common cause throughout the history of mankind of that suspicion and mistrust between the peoples of the world, through which their differences have all too often broken into war. The wide diffusion of culture and the education of humanity for justice and liberty and peace are indispensable to the dignity of man and constitute a sacred duty which all nations must fulfill in a spirit of mutual assistance and concern, unquote. I've always been inspired by the vision in the preamble of UNESCO. What is the purpose of UNESCO? To put it very simply, it is to contribute to peace and security by promoting collaboration among the nations through education, science, and culture in order to further universal respect for justice, for the rule of law, and for human rights and fundamental freedoms. The House of UNESCO is therefore built on 4 important pillars: education, science, culture, and also communications. These 4 areas of human endeavor are important to Singapore and to the world. Education and science are 2 of the sources of our national strength and of our economic competitiveness. Culture bonds us as citizens of a nation, but also as members of the same human family. And culture can elevate the human spirit. Communications is both a powerful tool of technology, but it is also a means to promote understanding and peace. Under the Singapore National Commission, there are 3 sub-commissions, 1 each on education, science, culture and information. I think you met the chairman of the 3 sub-commissions at lunch, but they are very bad people because after having had lunch, they are not here at the lecture. So I've scolded them. Yeah, so they didn't invite me to lunch, but I had the pleasure of listening to your lecture. Each of the sub-commissions has developed together with UNESCO a program of activities. I wouldn't go into them, but I want to single out one area in which UNESCO and Singapore work well together, and this is in the area of water. Director General, UNESCO's Institute of Water Education and our water agency, PUB, represented here by Michael and his colleagues, and the Asian Development Bank are the 3 partners of a knowledge hub on water based here in Singapore. And our mission is to share best practices, practical solutions to water problems, and our ambition is to make available in our lifetime clean water for all Asians. I want to say a word about Bulgaria. I must confess that I've not been to Bulgaria, but I have a very favorable impression of Bulgaria because of one very dear and good friend, Dr. Alexander Yankov. Dr. Yankov and I worked for many years together at the United Nations and in the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea, where he had a leadership position. In the year 2006, I had a great pleasure of arguing a case for Singapore with our friendly neighbor, Malaysia, before the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg. It was, for an old Law of the Sea person, a very nostalgic moment to stand in front of 23 judges, including Judge Yankov. So please convey my respects and greetings to Judge Yankov. I tried to do some research about Bulgaria, and I hope I didn't get it wrong. But Bulgaria has had a very colorful and somewhat traumatic history. According to my research, and I don't know whether this is legend or history, in the 2nd century AD, the Bulgars came to Europe from their old homeland, the kingdom of Balhara, situated in what is today the Hindu Kush in northern Afghanistan. I'm glad you left. In the 11th century, however, Bulgaria was absorbed into the Byzantine Empire. And in the 13th century, it was conquered by the Mongols. It then became part of the Ottoman Empire and was ruled by Turkey for 500 years. And Bulgaria only became an independent country in 1908. As you know, during the Cold War, Bulgaria was part of the Soviet bloc. But since the end of the Cold War, Bulgaria has done very well. It has regained its independence. It's become a parliamentary democracy. It has undertaken reforms and joined the NATO in 2004. No, yes, and EU in 2007. And until the global financial crisis 2 years ago, Bulgaria had 10 successive years of impressive economic growth. When I reviewed this history with my wife last night at dinner, we both came to the conclusion that Bulgaria has entered a golden period. For those of you from the private sector, you may want to look at the economic prospects of Bulgaria, because the tax regime is very favorable. I'm serious. The corporate tax is only 10%, and the income tax is a flat rate of 10%. So it's even more favorable than Singapore. I want finally to say a few words about the distinguished Director General. I'm very proud to say that she's the first woman and the first person from Eastern Europe to be elected Director General of UNESCO. She had an education partly in Moscow and partly in the United States, both at Harvard University and the University of Maryland. And again, according to my research, I don't know whether this is mythology or history, she was born in a town in Bulgaria whose population, consisting of Muslims, Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholics, and Jews, live in harmony and in peace. And this town had a Muslim majority. If this is true, then I can say that Director General, in a sense, you were born to be a multiculturalist and to be a human bridge linking different human civilizations. Irina Bokova has had a brilliant career as a parliamentarian, a diplomat, and as foreign minister. According to my EU friends, she was the driver of Bulgaria's successful negotiations for accession to the EU. And she also was the founder of the European Policy Forum, a very vibrant CSO in Sofia. My good friend Dr. Tan Lian Chu, who knows and admires her, described her as a highly accomplished and very popular diplomat, both in UNESCO and in Paris. And it is now with great pleasure that I invite you to deliver your lecture.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Kuan. Thank you very much for all the kind words addressed to me, addressed to my country. I have to say that I saw my mission here as spreading a lot more knowledge about UNESCO, of strengthening ties between Singapore and UNESCO. Now I see that we have to indulge into a love affair, which I don't mind. So I'm really very much inspired by what you said. And it's a very natural continuation of all full day of meetings, starting with the Prime Minister, then a wonderful meeting and lunch with the Minister of Education, President, Chairman of the National Commission for UNESCO, and visiting the National Institute of Education, and now here in this prestigious university. And I'm very grateful for you also for such a prominent diplomat and lawyer and specialist in international law. And I have to say that I knew about you from Professor Yankov long before I met you and long before coming to Singapore. So I was really very pleased that you said these nice words about Professor Yankov. We were discussing today with the ambassador now going around and talking about UNESCO. And you can imagine, as a new Director General, I have my ambitions also to reform the organization, to make it more visible, to make it more relevant, to make it much known to decision makers, to the intellectual community, to the academic community also. And after all these discussions that we have back in Paris and in different other venues, sometimes we say that if UNESCO didn't exist, if UNESCO hadn't been created in 1945, it should have been created today, isn't it, Ambassador? We just exchange exactly the same thoughts because UNESCO's mandate and activity is so relevant to what is happening nowadays in the world, to the challenges and to the responses that we have also to give to these challenges. That every aspect of our mandate, if you look at the education, into the science, into the culture and communication, actually gives the most of the responses to not only to the crisis, we hope the crisis will be overcome, but to the very deep challenges in this transforming and dynamic world. And that's why I do believe that we have an extremely important role to play. Now, I have a speech. And if I talk, probably I will talk longer than when I read the speech, because really we have an important agenda, and I want to share with you some of the most important activities and priorities that we have at UNESCO. Now, I have to say that I have come here to strengthen relations because, as you rightfully mentioned, Singapore was missing from UNESCO for a long time. And looking at the very impressive also development of your country, which became an intellectual hub and a university hub for a lot of current day advancements in technology and education, I think that relations between UNESCO and Singapore naturally has to be closer because we share the same approach and the common agenda. And I have to say that we were talking at UNESCO about what priorities are and how we see the division between the different sectors. Sometimes people ask me, but you have too many things on your agenda. You have education, then you have science, then culture, communication. What is uniting all these different sectors? Isn't it a handicap? Isn't it an obstacle? People don't know what you're doing. And I used to say, and I do believe it, that what previously was considered to be an obstacle and a handicap now becomes an advantage, because no single problem in this world is only linked to education or only to science or only to culture. It's so interlinked, it's so interdisciplinary. Let's take the example of climate change. How can you approach climate change with all these different aspects from the point of view of science, of education, of biodiversity linked to the cultural diversity, linked also to the communication aspects, without having an integral and intersectorial approach? So what used to be a disadvantage, I think nowadays, is becoming more and more an advantage of UNESCO's approach. So, as I said, I do believe that we are at the heart of some of the answers, and allow me to elaborate a little bit more on education, because in the Millennium Development Goals, education for all, which is UNESCO's main priority, second the Millennium Development Goal, this is actually what we are trying to promote, and we are trying to move very forcefully on the political agenda of global governance. And I would like to discuss exactly this role of UNESCO. And I just have to say that you rightfully pointed out also to the underlying mandate, which is as per our charter, as per our constitution, which is to build peace in the minds of people through education, through culture, through all this development. And I do believe also that still is very much relevant. So what makes us special is exactly this universal approach towards this global agenda, and also the fact that we have 193 members. This gives us actually, we have one more than the United Nations itself. It's a pride, big pride of Mr. Koichiro Matsura, my predecessor and my very good friend, who enlarged this organization to become even more universal. And I think that rightfully our legitimacy in the claiming that we are true leaders in these main areas of activity, we consider this to be very important. So we are ready, and we are giving multidimensional responses, whether we are talking about poverty or inequality or intolerance or environmental degradation. And that's why our 5 fields of competence, which are education, culture, natural science, social and human sciences, and communication and information, are foundations of this effort to build fair, sustainable, and democratic societies. To do so, UNESCO brings together decision makers, intellectuals, civil society, the media, and many others to share ideas, best practices, and experiences. This, in fact, is part of promoting solidarity through international cooperation. We also work directly with governments around the world. We'll help them improve their policies and develop their national capacities, whether to manage their education system, build a pluralist media, or protect natural and cultural heritage. This work, as you might imagine, often takes place behind the scenes, so to say. It may not be a media eye-catcher sometimes, but skilled planners, sound policies in institutions, as you know, in fact, in this School of Public Policy, are conditions for building stable societies. Now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is not something new that deepening inequalities between and within countries are a fertile ground for intolerance and violence to take root. And we see, unfortunately, this everywhere. The only answer is to work consistently to narrow the divides of income, literacy, knowledge, and development, because we all know that no society benefits from poverty. And we will not succeed in doing this without education. Education is the priority of the priorities of our organization. And I'm, of course, speaking here in a country that has consistently recognized the value of education and invested steadily in learning at all levels. But you might know that this is not by far not the case everywhere around the world, and it may seem evident for you in this country, but some leaders around the globe still have to be reminded that education is a fundamental right, fundamental human right, and that learning empowers, enlightens, opens doors, and gives individuals the knowledge to make informed choices. As Nobel economics laureate Amartya Sen puts it, education expands choices and allows people to live lives they enjoy and value, which is also extremely important. Without education, we will not speed up our progress towards the 8 Millennium Development Goals adopted by the world's leaders in the year 2000, which cover not only primary education, but also poverty eradication, gender equality, and health. And in this year, when we will have a big debate in September in New York, the United Nations General Assembly, it is worth mentioning once again what is the main thrust of the Millennium Development Goals. And education is more essential than ever in our knowledge-based societies. For all these reasons, for us, for UNESCO, it's a top priority. Now, 10 years ago, the World Education Forum in Dakar, Senegal, the international community set 6 key goals to be achieved by year 2015, known as Education for All, or EFA goals. And UNESCO was designated as lead agency for steering this progress. We have made significant achievement since then, which points to the value of having such international goals in the first place. More children are enrolled in formal education than at any time in history, and illiteracy rates are decreasing, if although slowly. Countries have made tremendous efforts with support from international development partners. But the world is not on track to achieve education for all by 2015. This is the sad truth. On current trends, there will be 56 million out-of-school children in 2015, compared to 72 million today. Still an achievement, but by far not satisfactory. And we have to remember then that 1 in 6 adults cannot read and write. And imagine just for a minute what kind of deprivation this creates for millions of people around the globe. The 2010 Education for All Global Monitoring Report, commissioned by UNESCO on a yearly basis, we published these global monitoring reports, which I launched at the United Nations this January in New York with Secretary Ban Ki-moon. I was very grateful because for the first time a Secretary General of the United Nations came to the launching of such a report. It warns that education is at risk, not only because of the economic downturn, but because governments in many countries are not doing enough to address the root causes of marginalization in education. This report highlights the powerful influence of social and economic circumstances on life chances. Being born in a poor household, living in a rural area, speaking a minority language. And all this has sometimes long-term consequences which are clearly unacceptable for us. Against this backdrop, the first priority in fighting marginalization is to guarantee access to education. So breaking the cycle of poverty begins by striking where disadvantage is found, and it is found in all countries to different degrees. In many cases, parents cannot even afford to send their children to school. In some, girls are still prevented from attending classes, and stigmatization on the basis of caste, language, ethnicity, disability, or HIV status remains a major factor of exclusion. We have to reach those who are at the bottom of the scale. It is happening, but it is not happening fast enough. And we consider at UNESCO that a new impetus is needed to help countries address these persistent inequalities. We need targeted policies to reach those who are left behind within an inclusive perspective that believes in every individual's right and ability to learn. What we do at UNESCO to achieve this, apart from helping governments, accompanying governments to set the right policies, we help countries also exchange good practices, to adapt them to their own needs, to put in place these policies, to make the right of education a reality for all. On the basis of all the analysis that we are making in the last years of where countries stay with the education for all implementation, we saw that improving quality is the second imperative for making education inclusive. All countries, whether they're poor, middle income, or rich, struggle with this question. Millions of children leave school without having acquired even the rudiments of reading, writing, and numeracy. In these conditions, education can hardly be described as a lifetime investment. At the same time, it is widely recognized that education is not just about getting a job. Rather, it should empower learners to become responsible and engaged citizens, capable and willing to shape more equitable and sustainable societies. Good education teaches also values and stimulates critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, and creativity. If the years leading up to the 2015 target date, UNESCO is ensuring that quality is recognized as an integral part of the Education for All agenda. Many countries lack the tools to systematically diagnose quality challenges in their education systems and to develop targeted interventions. Our organization is helping them to do exactly this, often in innovative ways. Let me give you an example. We are currently elaborating a comprehensive framework to assess the quality of educational systems. Countries will be able to identify what they're doing right, spot the areas where they need to improve, and adapt their strategies accordingly. This is a major contribution to making education systems effective and relevant. In Asia and the Pacific, for example, our Next Generation of Teachers project is helping teachers to improve learning through the judicious use of information and communication technologies. The project is informed by national experiences such as the Schools of the Future initiative launched in Singapore in 2007, which seeks to make classroom learning more relevant to the real world. The early years are critical for setting strong foundations, but learning happens throughout life. In September, UNESCO, together with the city of Moscow in the Russian Federation, will organize a major international conference on early childhood care and education, which sets the stage for later learning and improves health and cognitive growth. In the face of rapid technological change, all countries need to develop their human resources base through investments in secondary education, technical and vocational education and training, and of course higher education. Adult literacy, particularly for women, because 2/3 of adult illiterates are women out of almost 800 million illiterates in the world, has an undeniable multiplier effect on development. It may not be easy to put this comprehensive approach into practice, but it is counterproductive to only focus on one age group. This is the lesson that we learned after 10 years of implementing the Dakar Education for All goals. Education is pushing exactly, UNESCO is pushing exactly this inclusive vision. It has an impact on how education is run and what it stands for, as ultimately education system are measured by their capacity to reach all learners, respect them, and encourage tolerance, intellectual curiosity, civic responsibility, and confidence in the future. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I have already said, UNESCO has a key role to play in peace building and reconciliation to achieve the goal of promoting mutual understanding, tolerance, and a culture of peace. As you, Professor Koch, so rightfully cited, the initial mission which permeates all the activity of our organization, created immediately after the war in 1945, to build peace in the minds of people, to promote tolerance and respect for diversity. I'm profoundly personally convinced that dialogue among cultures is the antidote to intolerance and exclusion. And you mentioned some facts of my personal, which are right. I have to say that this is a very right quotation of this part of my life where my family comes, because Bulgaria still is a very multicultural society, and I lived in such environment, and on a personal level I'm more than convinced that this is the way societies have to be built. And that's why shortly after my election as Director General, I convened a high panel on peace and dialogue among cultures, made of eminent individuals from different geographical and intellectual spheres, and their role is to assist me in creating new avenues for peace in the 21st century. It is, of course, clear that issues today are on the agenda when we speak about peace, about tolerance, about mutual respect are different from what it used to be 30, 40 years ago. I'm convinced that we have to reconsider peace, to reconsider what we have to do in order to meet the new challenges. But this is a work that always merits investing efforts and intellectual input. I launched this year, it's an international year of rapprochement of cultures. I never know how to pronounce this word in English, rapprochement of cultures. We launched it at headquarters in Paris, and we organized a very high-profile public debate on two key themes: the power of cultural diversity and dialogue, and the role of shared values for building peace in a globalized world. We think that these two topics focus in them all the current challenges and also set a bridge for the future. It is encouraging that countries across the world have picked up on our message, and now we have a very elaborate and detailed plans in most of our member states to celebrate this international year of rapprochement of cultures, because we all know that our society is a product of multiple influences and cultures, and that globalization is a positive force when it nurtures respect for all cultures, encourages dialogue between them, and of course upholds inalienable human rights. And also because culture has a pivotal role to play in development. And this contribution, we know that the contribution of culture, of creative industries, are such an obvious example also of a response to the current day problems. We issued for the first time a world report on investing in cultural diversity and intercultural dialogue. We tried for the first time to formulate even statistical indicators for cultural diversity. And this is our also contribution to this huge debate about globalization and respect for diversity. And we tried to formulate, we set out 10 recommendations for governments AGOs, cultural organizations, institutions, and the private sector. And I would really encourage those of you who are interested in the topic to have a look at this report, which is our first such an attempt and our first contribution to develop a new and dynamic vision of cultural diversity, which encompasses public policies, multilingualism, media, education, and all other different issues of relevance. And of course, being here Director General of UNESCO, I can't but commend once again and celebrate the cultural heritage and everything that UNESCO is doing in the area of cultural heritage, which is part of our national identities. And I'm very happy here to see a very good friend of mine, Mr. Francisco Morales, who is a prominent, he's a president, a chairman of the National Committee of the Mexican Ministry of Culture, vice president of ICOMOS, and a prominent expert in the area, member of the World Heritage Committee, a good friend of mine. I'm very happy that you could come, Francisco, to this lecture to testify also to the importance of cultural heritage. And at UNESCO, you might know that we have 6 major culture conventions which set the ground for safeguarding culture in their form. And I have to say that culture is not about monuments, but about landscapes, about traditions, about cultural expressions, about cultural industries, about crafts, about festivals, and finally, about a dialogue within the community. A culture permeates also all fabric of our society, and culture is this cohesive element which makes our societies inclusive and more balanced. And in this field, I would like once again to express appreciation for Singapore's technical excellence in this field, since the country has received the UNESCO Asia-Pacific Heritage Award for Culture Heritage Conservation on 3 occasions in the past decade, although Singapore has not ratified the Convention of 1972. And we hope that this will become a reality also. We discussed this matter today with the Prime Minister. I know that here Singapore is serious about it. I think that it takes a very serious approach towards the ratification of some of these conventions. I'm very positive and very optimistic that Singapore will ratify not only the 72 convention, but also the other conventions that we have, which are so important. The Intangible Heritage Convention of 2003, the Convention on the Expression of Cultural Diversity of 2005, the previous, all these conventions on the illicit trafficking of cultural objects. I strongly encourage also Singapore to join, because you are in a crucial region here in this area from the point of view of, unfortunately, this trafficking. So I think by doing this, Singapore will tremendously contribute to the effort of the international community to deal with this problem. And I would like to also emphasize the enormous work we're doing at UNESCO to put culture on the global development agenda. I have always expressed my deep regret that culture is not among the Millennium Development Goals. And I'm not talking about arts for the elites, about something exquisite which is not known to the people. If you look at figures now, revenues from culture are almost overpassing revenues of tourism for some countries. It's a huge area of economic development, and as I said, of a development that brings more stability, more cohesion, and more balance in societies, more inclusion in certain societies. Culture plays an incredible role in some conflict and even post-conflict countries. We have enormous amount of projects in some of the post-conflict countries which are in the cultural area. But these exactly projects in the cultural area bring about stability and bring about more understanding of what it is to live in peace, and what it is also to be proud of your identity, what it is to understand what is the identity of the other ethnicity or a religious group. And I think it's an enormously powerful tool which, unfortunately, has not been used very much by the development community. And we will introduce elements of this link between culture and development during the debate in September. We have started already an incredibly strong work with the different partners and member states. I have been in New York on various occasions and talking not only to the Mr. Ban Ki-moon and to the other agencies, but also to the very wide range of member states who have some influential say in that. So let me move briefly also on another area of activity of UNESCO, which is science, and because you also mentioned, and I will try really to wrap up what I want to say. UNESCO is proud to have a strong agenda in two areas of science. One is, of course, the natural sciences, where we are very happy to host important international programs. One is, of course, the International Hydrological Program, which is one of our flagships in the natural science sector. Then, of course, is the International Oceanographic Commission, which is within also the auspices of UNESCO, and which acquires it's such a dynamic process there when you look at the interest and the incredible amount of work that is doing within the International Oceanographic Commission. We see more and more countries. Practically every month there is a country which is joining the International Oceanographic Commission. I'm happy that Singapore never left the International Oceanographic Commission, even during the time when you are not members of UNESCO, those 22 years. You stayed members of the International Oceanographic Commission, and it was a very important sign of your also interest and attachment to science research, and also to, I would say, to environmental studies, because within the IOC there is a lot of studies on the oceans, on the coastal prevention hazards, on the tsunamis and the tsunami alert system. In fact, within the IOC, the last achievement is the tsunami alert system in the Indian Ocean, which was elaborated after, unfortunately, the big disaster with the tsunami and the earthquake. And when the Solomon Islands were hit by a tsunami, this system was put in place, and we are very proud because we could save lives with this. So there is a practical implementation of what is being doing. And then, of course, it's the water management, it's biodiversity, it's biosphere reserves that also we have as a huge, vast area also of preserving nature. I was curious to know how much of the surface of land on the globe is covered by these biosphere reserves, and I received recently the data that it's the territory of India, all over the Indian subcontinent. Actually, this is biosphere reserves that are within our area of competence and of research which is covered. So it's a huge area of interest for us. Now, two important things, and probably I will stop here because I'm sure there will be some interest and some opinion also expressed on your side. It's water management. You rightfully pointed out that this last year's UNESCO is developing a huge sector on water management. We have 24 regional centers on water management in different areas of water management. These are national centers. We call them Category 2 centers. This means that they are national centers under the auspices of UNESCO, but we do participate in their governing bodies, and we contribute with some expertise in the research, and also we put them in a network also of exchanging data, of working together, depending on the different interests. And it's a huge potential. It's an enormous network of knowledge, of competence, of capacity that exists there. And I'm very much encouraged by the appearance of new water management centers, which means that it becomes a global issue, and we're contributing to that. And then, of course, you mentioned our Delft Institute of Education, postgraduate education on water management, which for the time being is unique. I know that United Nations University in Tokyo, with which, of course, we cooperate, are starting to set such a program, so we are cooperating very closely with them. And then, of course, is our center in Perugia, UNESCO Center, which prepares the global water reports. They are known as United Nations water reports. And I'm sorry they're not known as UNESCO Global Water Reports, because they're UNESCO Global Reports. But let's not be, vanity is not part of our lives. So we are modest, but we contribute. But let me say that they're 100% UNESCO water reports, and every 3 years, and they're an extremely important, unique, I would say, for that matter, tool of analysis, of data, of research, of policy setting, for that extremely important area of the global change. And finally, one word about climate change. Climate change is becoming an extremely important issue for UNESCO, area of activity for UNESCO. And I have to say that since 2005, before being elected as Director General, I was representing my country at UNESCO, including at the Executive Board. And I remember 5 years ago only, there was still a kind of a hesitation among certain member states whether what UNESCO has to do with climate change. Is it relevant for us? We have so many other things to do. Maybe it's not our place. Maybe there are other organizations which are doing. Now, 5 years later, not a single member state, not a single person or experts doubts about what we can contribute to this debate. And in Copenhagen, we formulated and I launched the UNESCO initiative on global change, where we put our interdisciplinary approach, everything that we do in the area of science, as I explained, and there are also other things in the area of culture, through the natural sites which are on our World Heritage List, because 1/3 of the World Heritage List are natural parks and natural sites, and the preservation of the uniqueness of these natural sites also has an enormous impact also on the studies of climate change. And then education, education for sustainable development, which is one of our also main areas in the education sector, but focusing also more on climate change. Now we're putting our first project, a concrete project of education for climate change. And then last but not least is looking also at the ethical side of climate change. Now it's a complex issue. There are different opinions on whether and what does it mean to have an ethical side climate change. And there are those countries who say, well, we have the Kyoto Protocol and some elements of this ethical side are already inscribed there. There are other countries who say, which is a polluter pays. Let's start from this. So they say, well, everything is said, this is the most important, let's not talk. There are others who say no, but there are also all different kind of other implications and impact of climate change on different societies. We see that in many of the African countries with the desertification, and we see what impact they have on the communities, what impact they have on education, what impact they have on women, on women's role in a society, on gender equality. So there are all different kinds of sites that are examined by the Commission on Ethics of Science. And last October, the General Conference of our organization adopted a resolution which entrusted us, the Secretariat, to consult member states, governments, and experts, and to report to the through the Executive Board to the next General Conference to see whether there might be a need to adopt some kind of a document, either a declaration or some kind of a document on the ethics of climate change. We are just in a very, very preliminary stage of having this debate. So we expect the governments to come back, but definitely there is an issue there to debate, and through our social and human sciences we contribute. And I could not, of course, end by not mentioning what we do in the communication sector, which is also important. All the more, I'm on my way tomorrow to Brisbane, where on the 3rd of May we will celebrate the World Press Freedom Day. Freedom of expression is enshrined in our constitution also as an extremely important area of activity. We do a lot in the information, access to information. We work with other agencies also in the World Information Society. We train journalists. We put up legislation. We worked in conflict countries, in post-conflict countries. So we try to promote this idea that it is important also to have this aspect of our societies in order to have inclusive and stable democratic societies. So once again, just to end, I think that the potential of UNESCO is tremendous in terms of cooperation, of promoting this global agenda. I'm very much looking forward to cooperating closely with Singapore. I think that in some areas, especially in education, in water management, in science, you can contribute with your experience in very concrete terms, a lot of good ideas also for others. You have had your own development. I'm sure that you will be expressing your solidarity also to help other countries in this region and in wider Asia area in order to make this happen. The potential of our organization is there. We have big ambitions. I would say we have dreams. We have a mission in this organization. And as the new Director General, I am very much committed to make this happen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Maybe you can take the question sitting down. Yeah. We have 30 minutes for questions and answers. The Director General has another meeting at 5:30. Dr. Francisco Lopez, she has been praising you so much. I think it's time for payback. So can you please ask her a friendly and challenging question? Please. Dr. Lopez, no? No. All right. Are you queuing up to ask questions? Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself to Director General?
Sure. Thank you very much for such an amazing lecture. I'm coming from Tajikistan, which is right on the border with Afghanistan. Unfortunately, my ancestors didn't leave the area. You talked about the cooperation that the organization promotes, and my question is, could you please give us a concrete example on how the organization influenced a particular decision on a state level? And is it your agenda at all to influence decision-making and law-making on a particular state level, or you target the bottom level and want the community to affect it in any way? Yeah, just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Please. Yeah, please.
Yes, we do work with mainly with governments. We are not a development aid agency per se. We are not a funding agency, let's put it this way, although our agenda is highly developmental. We work mainly with governments. We try to promote certain policies. We work with them on certain legislation, be it a legislation in the area of culture, like we help governments ratify certain conventions and comply with them, change their legislation, or we evaluate certain educational policies. We, for example, made a big evaluation of the policies in scientific field, very successful in Tanzania, for example. In many African countries, we do that. We have a lot of requests for this. Then we do a lot of capacity building. Just 2 months ago, I inaugurated a new building in Addis Ababa. We have an institute for capacity building of teachers in Africa. And I hope that it will become one of the biggest capacity building institutions in Africa. So we are working with lawmakers, state levels. Of course, on certain projects, we work also with NGOs. It's natural. Or we work in communities. For example, in Intangible Heritage Convention, where the principle of criteria of what should be inscribed in the list of intangible heritage is the opposite of the World Heritage Convention, and their communities matter. It's not outstanding universal value like the Heritage Convention in the intangible. It's entirely the opposite, what is valuable for a community. So there we'll help communities either put their file to prepare for the project, preserve their intangible heritage, make some connections, some collaboration. So it depends on the situation, but mainly we work with governments.
Is that right? Can you say something about what UNESCO is doing on two things? You mentioned in your speech that there are 800 people in the world who are illiterate, and 2/3 of them are women, yes. And that there are over 50 million girls who are not in school. So is there any gender-specific program in UNESCO to reduce illiteracy among women and to encourage all girls to go to school?
Yes, you're right that in terms of illiteracy, figures are still very, very much alarming. And I have to say that illiteracy kind of a little bit is a forgotten problem, because we started with the education for all, with children, but adult education was left aside by the developmental community, unfortunately. And last November, we made a huge, big conference, a UNESCO conference on adult education in Brazil, in Belém. We tried once again to make the advocacy for, and we of course adopted an important document, a declaration. There were many ministers, prime ministers also. It was an important conference to pass the message that it is not acceptable in the 21st century that still almost 800 million people are illiterate. And then, of course, comes the problem that 2/3 are women and girls. And now at UNESCO, gender equality is our horizontal priority. And we try to promote targeted policies for the education of girls. And I will be putting even a new initiative on education for girls because of the crisis. The World Monitoring Report this year showed that there is some kind of a regression, usually because of poverty, because of lack of access. Girls are stopped from going to school, and it's not acceptable for us. And then there is another problem, which are now we are identifying and trying to kind of pick it up and show into the international community and start dealing with it. Is for girls especially, it's dropouts of school at the secondary level. This is the biggest problem, because kind of we have been satisfied with figures on primary education, and we said, oh, the problem is solved, and in many countries girls are going there, so figures are okay. But when you dig inside and when you see what is actually happening, they go for 3 years and they drop out, or 4 years they drop out. So after some time, practically they're functionally literate, and they can't. So we will be focusing also in this problem, both from the point of view of legislation, because in some countries early marriages are one of the reasons for that. I mean, different, of course, situations in the world, but when legislation is needed in order to prevent this, to tap up, or some other specific. And of course, we cooperate with the other agencies, because there is this girls' education initiative which has been launched, and we do participate actively there. We do, but it's only on the primary education level, and we have to move and look kind of wider.
Please, can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, my name is Yasen Iliev. I come from Bulgaria. So above all, I would like to say Добре дошла в нашето училище, which means welcome to our school. Before I place my question, I would like to share an interesting fact about my country. In 2007, when we entered the European Union, our government was actually composed at the same time of Muslims, Jewish, and Christians, which is a unique example in this world, I believe. In this sense, my question concerns my future colleagues. We often discuss high-ranking careers in this school, but we somehow tend to forget the role of grassroots work. And I would like to ask you, from the point of view of sustainable development, peace and dialogue, which is the main point of this session, what is the role of the grassroots work, and what is your advice to us as students and future policymakers? Where shall we focus first? Thank you.
Well, it's a huge question. I think that peace begins at the community level. I mean, of course, we talk about high moral values, and we make high panels, and we discuss. It's important to make the advocacy, the necessity that the message passes. And as I said this high panel, there were Nobel Prize winners, and other religious leaders and intellectuals, and Peace Prize winners of UNESCO and others, and we had a wonderful discussion. But then it's about what is happening in the community, and there I think it's the biggest challenge. And we're trying to promote also through different projects such ideas. I was just giving today the example to the Prime Minister when we were speaking on this topic. When I was in Brazil, we work in Brazil a lot, also with the community level, and to try to make the society less violent, because in some societies with the rapid growth of economic and others, with these big gaps in haves and have-nots, as we say, and all the pressures of an open economy, there is a lot of violence. And we promoted some extremely interesting projects on the community levels to make, on one side, young people in these disadvantaged favelas in the regions and the police, who often clash in violence, to have them understand each other, so to say, point of view through all different kind of programs, even singing and dancing together. This is the way Latin Americans do it, isn't it? So I attended one such a street concert by policemen, and these young people from the favelas, who were, one was a former convicted and criminal who was initiating all this, and the policemen here had on their a badge of culture of peace. So, I mean, these are simple things, but they do matter a lot. So at the grassroots level, I think is where peace is, and tolerance and understanding among each other is being done. So if you're interested in such kind of work, I think it's so gratifying for young people to make something happen. You see it in front of your eyes, some change. So, and I'm very happy to meet a Bulgarian here. This means that we're really a globalized world.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Liban Mugabe. I'm from Rwanda in East Africa. Just two quick questions. Africa is normally portrayed as not necessarily the basket case, but just the case that is full of problems and many things. I'm just wondering, in this discourse of, in terms of where UNESCO is heading, what do you see Africa bringing on the table from a learning point of view, other than just being on the receiving end? Because I believe a huge chunk of your work is focused on that part of the world. And number two, I'm just curious, when we talk about culture, in the current world order, religion is playing a very cross-cutting role. And in some instances, it gets intertwined with culture. How does UNESCO deal with this, especially with the whole, Islam taking a different shape, Catholicism and things like this? Thank you very much.
Now, to the first question about Africa, of course, you're right that because some of the sub-Saharan countries, African countries, are among those 20 countries which can't cope with the Millennium Development Goals, and also we're trying to focus to help them. But at the same time, we see a lot of also good stories in Africa, and I think it's important that these good stories are encouraged. We see it in our own country, in Rwanda, and we will be launching with your president and the Director General of the International Telecommunications Union, the three of us, and me, a broadband initiative for education in the African countries with President Kagame and Monsieur Madoun Touré. So there is a good stories, and we see, for example, education improving in Benin. We see education improving in Ethiopia. We see Malawi also moving. So it means that difficulties can be overcome with good policies, targeted policies, and of course with the financing of respective institutions. It can be done, and committed leadership. I think this is very important, that we have really committed leaders to make this happen. It's extremely important. As to the second question, yes, you're right. Religion is part of also of culture, different societies. When I said that we started this debate, that's why I invited also religious leaders. I think that we have to understand what is the role of religion and the implications of religion, and if we know more about us. And if you talk to religious leaders, if you talk to them, you don't see problems. Everybody agrees, and we always agree that after all, they have the same values in humanistic point of view, in general humanistic point of view. It's how then it translates into the everyday life in certain communities, and often it is used for a pretext because of other reasons or because of other situations. It's not because of religion. If you look at religious wars in all over the history of humanity, after all, they were called religious, but they were also about something else at the end. And I think that if we look at also from this point of view of culture, encompassing also religion and having this more knowledge about each other, and finally, I do believe that youth and young people can play a crucial role in this understanding and dialogue and tolerance. Because young people today are different, I think, and there, if you look, they have commonality of interests and of expression. So,
thank you. On his first question, could I just say that when Kofi Annan was here, I did in fact ask him a question. I said, you know, Singaporeans tend to have a very negative view about Africa because the popular media only tell us all the bad stories. So I asked him, can you name 10 successful African countries which have good governance, where the leaders are interested not just in themselves but in their people, and which has a positive business environment. And he named 10 countries, among which is Rwanda. I remember he said, you know, Botswana, Ghana, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania, I can't remember all of them. But may I make one proposal to you? I think UNESCO should seriously consider publishing a book on the virtue of reconciliation and the culture of peace. 4 case studies. Because Rwanda is, to me, an inspiring story. They went through a genocide, and at the end of the genocide, the victims did not seek revenge. But because of the inspiring leadership of the President Paul Kagame, he preached forgiveness and reconciliation. In East Timor, Zanana Gusmao did the same thing. He did not seek revenge. He did not put anybody on trial, but he forgave those who trespassed against the innocent and brought about a culture of peace. The struggle continued. In South Africa, when apartheid ended, the great man Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu did not seek vengeance, but they had a commission of truth and reconciliation, and they forgave those who trespassed against them. In Chile, they also didn't put the abusers on trial, you know, but they asked for truth and reconciliation. I think these are 4 inspiring stories that the whole world should know about. And I think that since of all the UN agencies, you are the special one, devoted to promoting the culture of peace. I request you to consider doing an inspiring book on the virtue of reconciliation and the culture of peace. And these 4 case studies, Rwanda, East Timor, South Africa, and Chile.
I promise, but if you only help us.
Brema Mati. Brema Mati was a very good journalist, a woman who had a great heart, and I want to embarrass her by telling you something very wonderful that she did. She and a colleague in the newspaper, the Straits Times, which Sukwai belonged to, used to report on our schools. And these 2 wonderful journalists found to their shock and horror that when they visit some of the schools in Singapore, during recess time, there were some children who were so poor that they had no pocket money to buy a drink or to buy food. You know, they were drinking tap water and they were going hungry. And Brema and her colleague launched a wonderful initiative called the Straits Times Pocket Money Fund. And many of us contribute generously to this money, to this fund, so that the schools will be able to give vouchers to poor students. You see the prosperity of Singapore, but you don't see that there are also poor people here. So Brema is one of my heroes. So Brema, you asked a great question.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tomiko. And I've got a bad sore throat, so excuse. Thank you very much. And Prof. Tommy has already asked half of my question about the 800 people who are illiterate. I have two comments. Thank you very much for sharing the whole map of your vision on UNESCO. The first question is more of a comment. I think we have high mobility of people today in the world, and there are huge numbers of refugee camps, and many of them stay put for many years, and there's almost like a dormant group of people where we can do a lot of outreach where education is concerned. I would love to hear what UNESCO's plans are in reaching out to this huge bunch of people, both, and many of them could also come from border conflict issues where we can promote peace, dialogues, etc., as well as inculcate good values and education norms where they are concerned. And who is the right UN body? I've asked this at a few platforms. I can't see an owner, and there's an appeal here whether UNESCO would like to take this under its huge portfolio that we have already heard. The second question that I have is I would love to hear what's your vision of education, because it comes under the ambit of promoting peace and dialogue. What is the vision that will bring forth a generation that will be more inclined to promote peace and accept cultural diversity? What is that vision of education? Thank you.
Well, the first question, I think that very many United Nations agencies have a say in such situations, and of course there is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and also there is in specific cases some specific, like the Palestinian refugees or others, so it depends on the situation. And in such cases we cooperate all agencies, and of course each one has its own mandate, and we try with education to help. We work in, for example, in Pakistan we work with some of the refugees. Of course we work in the Palestinians, we work a lot in education. We work in somewhere in Africa also where there is such situation of displaced person and the refugees. I think it's rather a joint effort. I don't believe if United Nations High Commission of Refugees concerned about setting the infrastructure, everything, we contribute to the education. World Food Program contributes something else, so it's really a joint effort on the field. As to the second question, vision of education, well, we think that education is really, that's why we say a holistic approach. Education is about knowledge, of course, it's about facts, it's about science, about things. But apart from that, education is also about values. You don't just teach neutrally, so to say, education without giving some civic element and some values in school. And we consider that it's so important. That's why we say education for sustainable development. In that we put all different kind of dimensions. We consider that there should be the values of understanding, of tolerance, of knowledge about each other, that we are one humanity after all in this world. We introduce such elements. We have a lot of hundreds of such projects we have had, and we still continue having that in putting within the curricula also all these elements of respect, of human rights, of dignity of people, of gender equality. It starts there. It starts at school. It's not only afterwards to make declarations. So we promote this kind of civic. I think it's extremely important in current day world, and it's a little bit forgotten because of other priorities maybe. We want to revive a little bit and put more emphasis on that, and nature and climate change and how we tackle our environment. It's important. If you don't know it, if you're ignorant, you don't know that cutting a tree, what consequence will have, or just neglecting some water source, or not, or all the waste, and what is about health. It's important. It starts there. So we try to promote this kind of education.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Director General. I'm Yan Xiaoce, I'm PhD student from China. My question is, from your perspective, how to balance the cultural heritage protection and development? Because I find that sometimes the overdevelopment or marketization of culture and heritage for profit undermines the purpose of culture protection, which lose their original characteristic. Thank you.
Well, this is an extremely interesting question, which is always on the agenda of the Committee on World Heritage and on the Conference of States Parties to the Convention. I have to say that I don't know of any single case of heritage site where this dilemma and this problem is not staying, because it's one site you put it on the list, it attracts a lot of attention and tourism, it's good, it generates income. And then how you cope with the pressure. And then there are situations where you want a modernity, you want to bring something, you want economic activity. So the balance between the preservation of the authenticity of a certain site and how it is inscribed in the modern development is a huge challenge. And for the first time, in fact, in the history of the convention, a World Heritage Site was eliminated from the list, and it was with the Dresden, the old part of Dresden, of all things in Germany, because they wanted to build a bridge, a modern bridge, which connects the other side of the river with the old part. And there were huge debates for years, I would say. I don't know how many years. Maybe Senor Morales knows, because he was member of the committee and that time, and for years, and we tried to convince the German authorities, and I think the government was more or less cognizant, but the local authorities, it's a decentralized country, the local authorities said they knew that they will be eliminated from the list. They took the risk, and for the first time in the history of the convention, a site was eliminated from the list because exactly of this. But it's not the only case. There are a number of cases which are already there, where, because of modernity and because of the will in order to develop quickly and to make some, either build a big building close to a natural site, or to build a highway, or to make a pipeline, or I mean, you name it. There
It could even be just the pressure of success. I mean, if you look at Angkor Wat, Angkor Wat is in danger of being overwhelmed by visitors. Yeah. On the other hand, you've done a wonderful job in Luang Prabang in Laos. I'm very proud of you. Yes. But I don't know what advice we can give to our Cambodian friend, because it's such a poor country. They need development, they need employment, they need revenue. And so they promote tourism to Angkor Wat. But it has been so successful that now this World Heritage is in danger. From too much success, I think.
We help them manage such situation, make it clearly a development agenda, but at the same time preserve it, part of their lives.
We're 5 minutes and two questions, so let me, can both of you ask questions one at a time, and then she'll give a joint answer to both of you, and I must conclude come, you go first.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Memiya Tochibayashi from Japan. I'm a student of the Kuan School. My question is about the education at civilization and uncivilized people or society. Before I entered this school, I worked for the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, so-called UNMISS, and I was deployed in the boundary area with Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And in my area of responsibilities, there are still a lot of uncivilized people who doesn't even wear the shirts, clothes, but they were carrying the submachine guns like AK-47. And as a team leader of the electoral operations, I was asked, I need to conduct the civic education. But when I was planning the civic education, I was always wondering if the education at civilization is contradicting with saving the uncivilized culture or society. I think it is also one of the mandate of the UNESCO to save the uncivilized or minority society and culture. But the education, when we say education, I think it includes more the Western value. So I think it will affect.
I think maybe I hope you will not be offended. Maybe we shouldn't refer to people as uncivilized.
Sorry,
Yeah.
okay.
I think that you can say that some indigenous people may be pre-modern, you know.
Sorry, yeah.
They may not have had the kind of.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So anyway, you got your question. Robert Dodge, briefly, please.
Yes. Yes. I'm Robert Dodge, and I know that at the end of your talk you mentioned World Free Press Day, and in 2005 I know UNESCO came out with a report that discussed Singapore's ranking of 160 in the world on free press, and I was wondering if there's anything that UNESCO does to try to encourage a change in that ranking, and how you think, as far as the one developed country in the world below 100, that would benefit Singapore to change that ranking.
Well, freedom of expression is really a very important area also of our activity, and what we do, we promote it. We try to convince all different governments. We try to convince the journalists themselves of the importance of their work. We try to promote legislation. We have helped promote in very many African countries, not only in African countries, but mainly there recently, legislation on the freedom of expression. We give good examples. We make exchange programs. We have also some modules in different parts of the world in order to make it. And we are not kind of a court in order to kind of penalize or to say this or that, and then to expect that it will happen as a kind of a miracle. It's a little bit like gender equality, and we all know how important it is, and we know that there are countries which do not have very high on their agenda, especially gender equality. But what we try to do, we try to convince and we try to change this to convince in the merits of what we are preaching, that it will be good and better for different societies if these values are adopted. So that's what we are doing. And I think we're doing a good job also in that. We have Freedom of Press prize every year. We have an independent jury that is attributing this prize, Guillermo Cano Prize of the killed Colombian journalist. And this year in Brisbane, I will be awarding this prize to a Chilean journalist who was during the time of Pinochet and all the way through, and even today, a very active promoter of this value.
Do you have a comforting word for Japanese friend who face such huge challenges in southern Sudan and then dealing with armed men who obviously have no interest in peace?
Well, it's the situations of violence. I mean, when you have such a conflict and situations of violence, it's different really to promote all these ideas. You have to work tirelessly. You have to use all different channels of communication to express, especially in Africa, and especially the problems with the children soldiers. It's a huge problem of bringing back. We try to bring these kids back to school, and that way to make them understand what is at stake and to understand the value. When human life doesn't have a value for one person, how can it have a value for the other, for those who are in front of you? So it's a huge challenge.
But the only comforting word I have for you is that very often the Security Council, in my view, in order to put off domestic pressure for them to help people in distress, wrongly send peacekeepers like you. No, I'm serious. To situations where there's no peace to keep, where people are not willing to lay down their arms but are intent on fighting each other. There is no peace to keep. And it is, in my view, very wrong for the Security Council to send peacekeepers to all parts of the world, not just Africa, but even in Europe, ex-Yugoslavia, when there was no peace to keep. You know, it's a terrible experience for a peacekeeper like you. So you have my sympathy. I must bring the lecture to a close because the Director General has another meeting at 5:30. It's been a wonderful afternoon. She has a very important mission, but she's a charismatic and inspiring leader. So will you join me in wishing her success in her important mission?
Thank you very much. Thank you.